It's the new first episode.
This is the first episode of Infinite. And what's strange about it is we've been making a podcast very similar to this one for a while now.
Yeah.
But that was only in Norwegian.
Yes.
But now we're branching out.
Oh, yes.
Because from what I can tell, a lot of people speak and understand English, whereas did you know that on a global scale, 0% of the world's population can understand Norwegian?
No. It must be a little bit more than 0. Like 0.0.
Yeah, 0 point something, but like literally nobody.
Because
like
I know some people
You know some people.
that speak
I
Norwegian.
also know some people. I have some Norwegian friends. Most of them actually are Norwegian. I have an English-speaking one as well, yes. So that's...
So here we are.
Here we are. We're speaking English for the first time on the podcast, except we did have an English-speaking guest once. But that was on the Norwegian podcast. So I guess our English-speaking listeners, you guys, didn't hear that one. Well, this is the first episode, even though it's not the first time we're doing this sort of podcast.
Yeah.
What is Infinite?
It feels good to be fresh again, like new.
Yes, like a new pair of clothes.
Yeah. It's nice.
Spring cleaning.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is Infinite?
Infinite. It's a podcast where I think there's room for everything. There is nothing. I think, like we have talked about so many times before, like if we have a niche, it is that there is no niche in a sense.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So, but of course, still, we are interested in what we are interested in. So it always comes to some kind of deeper perspective on what's going on or what we're trying to figure out.
Yes, because this is a spiritual podcast, is it not?
Yeah, you could say that.
Yes, because we are on a spiritual journey.
Yeah.
I guess all of us are, but some more conscious about it than others. And we wanted to make a podcast about that, talking about the infinite things we can wonder about and maybe joke about, talk about, laugh about, and cry about, I guess, as well.
Oh, yes.
Because there's lots of things to experience in this experience called life. And we had like parentheses around the IN, right? So it's finite, infinite, which I guess points to the whole dualism of this experience called life, because it seems so like locked in position. Like there's these opposing forces. It's like good and evil, men and women, for and against, and we can go on.
Black and white.
Black and white. But it also seems to me, and I know to you as well, that there is some gray matter in between.
Yes.
I don't remember who said this, but I really liked it. But you know, like the yin-yang symbol, it's black and white. So it's like the good and the bad, and the good follows the bad, and there's some bad in the good, and there's some good in the bad. If you like take it to extremes, it's gonna be good's gonna be bad, and if you go bad enough, it's gonna be good. But it's a snapshot.
Yeah.
It's in motion. So if you press play on the experience, it's gonna be gray, because it's all gray,
spinning
baby.
so fast that you can't see.
Which I really liked, because nothing is standing still.
Yeah.
Not even the yin-yang symbol.
Yeah.
But you couldn't paint it in movement, because then it'd just be a gray circle.
Yeah.
The moon is the yin-yang symbol. It's just spinning so fast. This is not true. You can see it's sort of like a moon phase, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the purpose of this podcast? Why are we making this podcast? And did I already ask that question?
No, you didn't ask it that way exactly, but for me, it's an opportunity to speak words after another, creating
Freely?
sentences. No, I think for me, it's having that space where, because I've noticed the more I trust that whatever comes out of my mouth in conversation with other people, that is conversations like we have, and also when we have guests, that the space we are creating are actually, it seems that it has the tendency to open up for people that listen to this as well. So that, I don't know, it's like, for me, that has been so kind of a person that didn't speak, because I used to be really shy, really holding back all my information, so to speak, because I was always valuing other people's opinions beyond my own.
Yeah.
And I
Can
thought
relate.
that if I was going to speak, it has to be something that was so good that I could convince other people that they agreed to my opinion. So I was very opinion based, that either it's good or it's bad. Either it's accepted by other people or it's not accepted by other people.
Is it right or wrong?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
can
it was
totally
very
relate.
black and white.
I wanted always to be right
Yeah.
and never be wrong.
Yeah. So, no, my point is just that having a space where you create that open space to conversations without limits
You can talk about
is
anything.
really useful, both for myself, and I get a lot out of these conversations, and I'm lucky to have a lot of those kind of conversations in my life now, and this podcast is part of that. But I think that the fascinating thing is also how much it can give to other people listening to it.
That's because it spreads.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so creating this thing that we're doing, it's making more, influence than we actually can imagine right now, I think. And I'm not saying that to be high on myself. I'm just saying that that's how it works. So that's also why I encourage other people to do the same, either as a podcast or just as
Normal conversation.
take that conversation open up the conversation with people, and be courageous to open it beyond those kind of usual boxes you are speaking from, because more and more people are open to ask better questions about life.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
in a typical conversation, you would sort of limit yourself, right?
Yeah.
To sort of what's acceptable, what to talk about with this person and that person. And I wouldn't want to share this information with that person because that would be all
Exactly.
wrong. But
So
in this sort of, and this is what I love about our podcast as well, it's sort of open up the opportunity to speak about anything,
yeah,
and to not sort of say, wait a minute, we need to either hook this onto some sort of fact-based, or is this right or is this wrong, and just let it be for this period of time when we're talking. We're just listening to each other and just talking without being sort of preoccupied with being right or wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's, I guess, is how I would, like, when I was younger, I would typically, as you said, attack any conversation as will I win this conversation or will I lose it? Will I be right or will I be wrong? And if it was like someone I was agreeing with, we would just be sort of affirming each other's beliefs by being like, yeah, I'm right. Yeah, you're so right.
Exactly.
I agree with your rightness.
That used to be my life, is that, and I've trained for it so long, and I'm really good at it. It's like, how do I respond to someone presenting the idea of the world that I think they need to hear?
Yeah, nice.
And that's fucked up.
Yeah, that is
But it's
fucked up.
yeah, but it is like you could say it's a skill to be adjustable and not push any
You're like
buttons.
a chameleon.
Yeah, And I'm not saying that's wrong in the sense that sometimes it's a useful, you know, skill, maybe the
Well,
word.
it's a sort of like a survival skill, isn't
Yeah,
it? Because
yeah,
to sort of survive in this environment,
yeah,
if you sort of adapt
exactly.
to
And,
your
and sometimes
environment.
that makes a lot of sense. You don't always need to push other people's buttons, you know.
No.
But there is a balance that
And
you have
also,
to be
may
true to
I
yourself.
interject?
Yeah,
Does change happen if you constantly try to avoid
no,
pushing,
it doesn't.
nudging, bumping into things? If all you do in your life is sort of trying to to stand clear of doing anything wrong, you just want to be right from birth to death.
Yeah,
If you could sort of live the perfect life, which it sort of seems like we're trying to,
yeah,
would be to sort of be born, be
mm,
perfect, and then die at the age of 93 with your entire family around you saying, "We love you and you've been great."
exactly,
Um, but where was the lesson? Where was the growth? Where was nothing
exactly,
happened?
exactly. And another thing that I just realized when you talked about it now is that what what I see valuable with this podcast is also the fact that after we started launching the Norwegian version, which we have done, we have had this Norwegian podcast for I don't know 1.5 year
Yeah,
something.
well over a year, yeah.
Yeah, and so we have this experience, and I also me personally have my Norwegian YouTube channel uh, with Norwegian videos talking about the spiritual world and stuff. And the feedback from both those things has sometimes been that thank you for putting words to what I felt but couldn't
Yeah.
put words to. And I've noticed that over time that a lot of people are really curious about the things we talk about, but are sometimes afraid to start or interact in the conversation because they don't know what words to use for it, because they are not used to talk about it. Doesn't mean they don't want to talk about it, but they don't have the
Vocabulary.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know how to put it into words.
Yeah, because they have
So
maybe had these experiences or
yeah,
just this feeling or just about anything, and you're not
exactly.
unable to sort of
And I
relay it. Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
totally.
and I really see that now back to the time where I was not into spiritual stuff at all. I never was really like in denial of the spiritual world or that kind of reality, but I was never really open to it in the sense that I talked about it or did any research or explored it in any sense. But I was never real. I see that now. I was never really in denial. Like that doesn't exist. I just wasn't interested because. But when people talked about it, I could just be confused and look another way
Yeah.
because I didn't know how to put words on it. I didn't know how to talk about it. Or also, like I see now, is that a good example for me is that watching movies now, and in the when it comes to kind of abstract, um, what do you call it? Abstract understandings of movies. Um,
Yeah, but subtext or deeper
yeah,
meanings baked into sort of
I
like
could
the
very often feel that
subject
oh,
matter.
this movie kind of touched me, but I can't really tell it to anyone other than yeah, it's a really good movie because I
Yeah.
have no idea how to put words on that, and I didn't realize that back then, but I see it now that sometimes with friends that are not like having these kind of conversations that we have, I can see how it touches them, but they don't have words for it, and I recognize that because I used to be that way. Now I can put words to these kind of abstract experiences because I'm used to more, at least more used to, having these kind of conversations. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah, I think that's an important point because it starts with curiosity, and sometimes we need a little bit of help to kind of have the courage to start putting words on things, start being open about exploration, and
Well, I guess it's very natural, right? Because so when you first experience something that you've heard no one talk about, you're all alone.
yeah,
There's nobody else. You're the
exactly.
only person in the world who can feel that. This will be both positive and negative. But and then all of a sudden you'll hear someone else speak of this. Say, for instance, speak of depression, or speak of love, or speak of well, out of body experiences, or
Yeah.
whatever, and or being abducted by aliens. So you're having these experiences and you haven't shared them with anyone, and they're yours alone. Like you didn't know anyone did or had these experiences, but then maybe you come to
Yeah.
realize that you are not alone, and you learn the vocabulary, you learn to talk openly about it, and become so more assertive and feel more safer in that truth. And you're ready to move on to the
And
next
the
truth. I
fascinating
guess.
thing about that is that people that have no reference to what we are talking about in this spiritual podcasts might not know that they might have a reference about what we're talking about that just haven't linked the two.
Yeah.
Like they've had their own experiences, but they haven't labeled them as spiritual or as real in any sense. It can just be a dream, or it can be something, oh, it was a trick of the mind, or it
Yeah,
was
yeah, we just
something.
left it aside,
Then,
and
yeah,
let's not explore
just
that
yeah,
because it
and
seems
just
nonsensical. Yeah.
yeah. So they might actually have the references. They just haven't yet come to the point where they have a need or a wish for to kind of realize that these things are actually things that other people experience as well, and that they're not alone about these things.
Each is journey, right?
Yeah.
Because so maybe it's there. It's always there for you, like, but you have to be ready. But I was thinking, like you said, about movies. So, like Stanley Kubrick's 2001: Space Odyssey. When I saw it the first time, I felt super uncomfortable because it was speaking to me at a level which I couldn't understand.
Yeah.
And or like David Lynch films. And I remember, like, me and my friends would be saying, like, so, well, I guess we should watch it another time and another time to see if we can understand the film. And I guess my biggest like breakthrough in understanding anything was stopping to try to understand it, and instead just feel
Yeah.
what you're feeling and relating to that. Because like the truth will always speak to you, whether you're listening or not, but it will be uncomfortable
Yeah.
when you're sort of not quite ready for it, and maybe you will feel sort of dumb because like I don't understand this intellectually. But that might be because it's not possible to understand it intellectually, because if you're going to start talking about 2001 intellectually,
Yeah.
you're going to make a whole lot of nonsense coming out your mouth. And that's,
true.
as far as
true.
I can tell, that's the magic of storytelling.
Yeah.
Or anything, is like the moment it gets magical, you just have to go along with it for the ride.
Yeah.
Like my favorite term, suspension of disbelief. Because if you're gonna like live your life being like, well, seeing is believing, and if it's not proven, I can't touch it, or then it's not real. Then it never will be. It's just gonna be like dead in front of you, but it's still there. But you can't see it.
That's true. I haven't seen the Space Odyssey movie since probably I remember I borrowed it on cassette on at the library when I was
The library.
Yeah, and I watched it, and it touched me, but I had I didn't understand anything of it. Like I couldn't put words to any of it. Like, and I haven't seen it. I've been thinking so many times that I want to see it again now to have a new experience of it. But I just remember that it was a really weird movie that touched me, but I couldn't understand why. Like,
Yeah.
and it was a little bit scary as well. I remember, like, there
Yeah,
was
and
some
that's I guess that's
was
Stanley Kubrick's
uncomfortable elements in
gift
it.
to
Yeah,
the world,
yeah,
right? Like most of his films, like at least that I can
yeah,
think of, points into some truth that we are sort of not wanting to look into.
yeah,
And I think that's like such a gift and such a the bravery,
mm,
and also like just the sheer insanity of making a film that most people don't have the language to, like you talked about, like having words to actually convey what you experienced.
yeah,
That, like, when was 2001 made? Like in the late 60s, is it? It's
yeah.
like super old.
Yeah, it is.
And well, I guess you had like the hippie age, so maybe people actually had the language
Mm,
to convey what the movie was sort of dipping into.
mm,
But like when I grew up, it was like if I wasn't to talk to my dad or anyone about like what's this movie about,
yeah,
nobody would say anything because
uh,
nobody would be able to
yeah.
speak
Exactly.
of it. So that's
Exactly.
so cool.
Mm. Wow.
But that doesn't mean it's not there.
Mm.
Like this podcast, it's here
It's
in
here.
English.
Woo.
So it's sort of strange because, like, so we're in Norway,
Mm.
and if I go abroad, so say I go to the UK, I'll get accustomed to speaking English, and I will probably speak like British English.
Mm.
And then if I go to America, United States, I will speak more like American like. But today we started speaking English just off the bat, like
Yeah.
we just had a
In
Norwegian
Norway.
conversation first, and then we spoke English, which
Yeah.
is weirder, but
is.
still quite fun. I love the English
Yeah.
language.
Yeah. Me too.
Even though we will probably run out of like the
Yeah.
more eloquent words, or
Yeah.
we need like a
Probably.
dictionary or something to
Yeah.
Google Translate it. But
I've been so back and forth on what I think about doing things in English and versus Norwegian, because I used to be, when I grew up, I was like, oh, I want to move to the US, I want to live abroad
I can
and
relate.
things like that. And I came to a point where I didn't speak English much on the outside because I didn't dare to, but in my head I was I was thinking most of the time in English because I just loved that language. And when I got older and I started, exploring this personal development, and I realized, oh, you have to be a speaker, and have to create your own stuff and sell it and get rich, and make this career in helping other people. I was so convinced that, oh, I need to take over the world with English speaking products, which didn't work out. But yeah, but that back then I was so convinced that English was the way to go. And then this was before the spiritual awakening. So what happened when I started waking up was that I just realized that it doesn't matter. And then I had a time where I needed to go through the Norwegian, kind of taking ownership of my own language, and that's why I started the YouTube channel in Norwegian. Even though it's a smaller market, which was a negative justification.
Yeah.
Because that's not good enough, because you have to go big. And so, long story short, is that I realized, okay, it's not the number of people that matters, is how you influence them. So I realized that, okay, it doesn't matter. So for a long time I was holding on to the Norwegian language just because I had this idea that it doesn't matter. So I got stuck the other way around again. And now I think I'm mostly free, that it's okay either way.
Yeah, anything goes. Yeah.
So
That's a more
that's why I
comfortable
don't have a
place.
problem with this podcast, I think. And it's fun. I realize now we started talking in English. I like talking English. It's fun.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I always loved the
Yeah.
English language. So I always also imagine myself sort of being an English speaking. And I have to confess that very often I find myself thinking in English.
Yeah. Me
Um,
too.
which is interesting. And also, if I get like when you guys had the surprise party, there was a surprise party for me when I turned 40, and I started swearing in English,
Mm.
which I also think is sort of
Yeah.
funny. But yeah, it's language again.
Yeah.
So if you can't speak a language, it just sounds like gibberish, right?
Mm.
But then if you can understand it and have a conversation in it, you're all of a sudden part of the tribe, you're part of the group, you're sort of getting access to information and
Yeah. That's
stuff
true.
that was not available to you. Like, for instance, my initiative to learn English was the Cosby Show, because we were watching it and it was subtitled, but I couldn't read fast enough because I was just a kid. And my family were laughing their asses off because Mr. Huxtable was doing all sort of funny things, and Thea was drinking out of the juice carton, and I was like, "What's going on here? What's this secret? I want to know what this is all about." And I guess that sort of made it really interesting to like just
Yeah.
absorb this language.
Yeah.
And then I became part of the tribe.
Mm.
Yeah. And I guess it's the same thing, yeah, with the spiritual
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. It is. It is.
Because like when I first started having these, because like I, a bit unlike you, just refused to accept anything less than the scientifically proven.
Mm.
And anything resembling the unexplained would be bullshit, hack, nonsense, lies, a con. So when I all of a sudden found myself in the position where I had an experience, which was like, well, mind expanding, or like a larger reality than the one I was sort of in, or just it just sort of like, but what's this all? What's going on here? And luckily I sort of realized you were on the same path because we've been colleagues for lots of years working in television and then like without having someone to share that experience with, I think I would probably if I found no one that I could talk to it about,
Yeah.
I would have just dismissed it as a nonsense experience and gone on with my super sciencey carbon-based life.
Yeah.
Sharing is caring.
Wow.
But then again, like language is important, but also not understanding a language is also important, because if you could understand anything, you wouldn't have any like the sort of the fun of experiencing,
Yeah.
learning, growing. Like if when you were born, you can speak any language, which to some extent seems fairly true, or you can understand anything because you're just you're fresh, box fresh, and then you sort of grow in and you find this one language and you forget. But then you're like, whoa, look, there's all types of languages, and there's like, or even like just mathematics, which is a language, or codes, which is a language.
Yeah.
Everything is sort of like a language, and some languages more complicated than others. Some languages you can't even use words to convey, which I find so fascinating. Like having like non-dual experiences, trying to talk about them, be like blah 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 blah, but there is no word for that. So bear with me. And I do recall in the Norwegian episode, I'm gonna stop referencing Norwegian episodes because that's so lame. I had the metaphor which was color television.
Yeah.
I was really happy about that, and I'm gonna reshare it to the international listeners, which is so you just watched color television for the first time. It's in colors. It's crazy. And you come home to your friends and you're trying to tell them about color television. And they're like, what? What's the big deal? That's not so special. We have black and white. It's fine. We know that her shirt could be red or green. It doesn't matter. But you have to experience it. You have to see it to actually understand what the deal is.
That is so true.
Because
But you can't convince anyone.
you can't sell a color television without having them see it.
Yeah.
You'd be like
that's
just
the interesting thing with. That's why the argument can never be won in terms of proving the unexplainable.
you just have to experience it.
Yeah, it's because it's an experience. Life is an experience, not an, I don't know, calculation or.
It's like a fact check.
Yeah.
True or false.
Based on what?
Yeah, life would be so much more fun if you just like got like a manual saying, this is how everything works. Now you can just...
Then wouldn't be a need to be here, I think.
It'd be like playing Super Mario, but you'd get to the end like the princess, Bowser steals the princess, but he's just on the next, like, you just have to go through like one castle there. There's no obstacles. And there is. And Bowser be like, got me.
Sounds like fun.
It just sounds like quite a game, yeah. So all in all, I have to say it's this game called Life is quite extraordinary, and there seems to be infinite possibilities to both enjoy and mess up and be in unbelievable pain, both physical and I guess even more mentally.
Yeah.
I
wouldn't be without it.
Yeah, why would that would make no sense?
Yeah.
This is it.
I'm glad we came to this crazy planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So small in the bigger scheme of things, but wouldn't want to miss it.
Yeah, exactly.
Should put up a bigger sign. Earth. With like an arrow.